It's amazing. You push one button and boof, everybody's there.
Everybody's here. There may be others that are going to join, but it's 6:01, so let's get this party started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you again. This is our final webinar for Decoding Dyslexia this year, or in October, I should say, not this year.
Just for October.
Just for October's events. And tonight we are going to discuss how to help kiddos in 4th grade and beyond, accommodations and modifications. So tonight we have with us 2 members of the Decoding Dyslexia Idaho team. Dr. Kim Zadel comes to us as our 2015 Idaho State Teacher of the Year. And after 33 years of being a classroom teacher, she's now retired and has devoted lots of time in supporting change in dyslexia here in Idaho, and is also dyslexic herself. Her mom and her daughter are also dyslexic, so she comes not only from an educator's background in recognizing the need, but also has a personal journey and experience into how dyslexia has impacted her family. So thank you, Kim, for being with us tonight. And Ms. Jordan Atnip, she joins us as a special education teacher here in Idaho. She also is a member of the Decoding Dyslexia Idaho team. She has recently taken it upon herself to get her Master's of Education through NILD with she's now an NILD educational therapist and has a lot of knowledge around dyslexia and dysgraphia and supporting kiddos in the classroom. Those that are out in her school district are certainly blessed to have such a truly passionate special education teacher. Thank you, ladies, for being with us. I think everyone who's been waiting in the waiting room is with us tonight, so I can turn it over and get started. Have we done the handout? Does everybody have tonight's handout? Rose?
It was sent with the link.
Okay. Okay. And I think tonight I have the chat box open. So ladies, are we going to stop for questions throughout? Okay. Yeah. So I'll manage the chat box and please post questions. This will be an interactive session and we have till 7:30.
Thank you, Robin. All righty. So tonight we're going to talk about accommodations and modifications and the difference between the two.
Hang on a sec, because Robin, you need to let me share.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hang on.
Can I share now?
I think so. Rose, are you with us?
Yeah.
Share.
Oops, I got it. I think I fixed it. Is it working now? Oh, there we go.
Working now, guys?
Sure.
Okay. Come on. There we go. Okay, now we can start. I go to the second page.
So an accommodation is something that changes how a student learns the material, and a modification changes what the student is being taught or what they're expected to learn.
So when to ask for accommodations, this is when your child comes home crying, they're struggling to keep up academically, the child is not performing at the expected level compared to their verbal expression. A lot of times these little guys have great vocabulary, and then when they start to read, they're just way behind. And that's a good clue that something is not quite right. The child spends many hours on homework each night. This is where you check with other parents of children in your child's class and ask, how long are they spending on homework? And then compare that to what your child is. I know for myself, I always had to spend twice as long as my friends, and my mom's attitude was tough, suck it up, do it. And so I did. And as a parent, it finally came easier because then I started reading for fun, but not through school.
So who determines which accommodations are provided? You want to include your team at school, so the parent can help push that movement forward. Discuss that with your general ed teacher, the Title I teacher you want to include if your child's receiving Title I services. You want to make sure that the accommodations address your student-specific needs. So even though accommodations are out there, your student might not need those accommodations. And if you provide something such as text to speech or speech to text, your child needs to know how to use and apply that accommodation effectively.
So there are different types of accommodations. Presentation, this is how the material is presented to your child. Is it orally, verbally, a mixture of those? And the response is, how does the child provide feedback to the teacher? Is it in writing? Is it orally? Do they do a project? Is it an art project? Setting is, where is the child learning? Are they sitting in the front of the room, the back of the room? Are they sitting on a ball? Are they standing? These are all different options that are available to kids. Timing, is this in the morning or the afternoon? Whenever the class is, what's the best time for that child to take a test? Scheduling, this is scheduling their whole day. Whether you put the math first or reading first, or save it for the afternoon, right after lunch where they've run out, gotten rid of all the wiggles. Organization skills, selling, how to put their stuff in their backpack, make sure they have all the work they need to go home, make sure it comes back. Planners are great for these kids. State testing, there's accommodations specifically for that, and Jordan will talk about that later. And then what accommodations do you provide the child for their reading, their math, and all their other subjects? Keeping in mind, accommodations help the child learn, and it's how they learn, whereas modifications are what they learn. That could be two different things.
Yeah, so the accommodations are going to provide the student with access to the grade level instruction and access to the information that needs to be learned. The types of presentation accommodations that are available, the students can have access to an audio recording instead of having to read the text. Different audio books or videos, digital media instead of written text, providing the text in a larger font by increasing the spacing between your words or fewer lines per page, having a test question reader, or instructions are provided orally. It could be more than just the instructions, the questions could be provided orally as well. The students can have access to a recorded lesson or a lecture, notes from the teacher, having an outline for the lesson, visual presentation of the directions, text-to-speech software, and
So Jordan, on the notes from the teacher, a lot of times some people will say, have a peer take notes and then make a copy for the student. Do you like that idea?
I am not a fan of that. That really kind of puts other students on the spot. And, if it's what that other student is interpreting, if you're taking notes in a classroom, let's say you're in high school, that might not directly be what your struggling student may need. And so I don't know if you've ever tried to read somebody else's notes from a class lecture or anything like. It's very difficult. I have a hard time reading my own notes, but you can talk through it and figure out, what it was applied to. And I think having student or notes from another student is pretty difficult and not the best accommodation to use. So anything that a teacher can provide, providing that outline of the lesson and having them fill in just a few words, so they are interacting a little bit, but sometimes that written response takes so long. You want that child to engage in the conversation or be actively engaged and be paying attention to what's going on. And so sometimes that note taking is very difficult.
Yeah, and when I taught social studies at the high school level or the middle school level, I would always tell my special ed students that needed the notes, listen in class, participate in class, and at the end of class, I'll give you a copy of my notes. And I print so that most of them were okay with reading it.
Yeah. Specific reading accommodations. So a word window or a guided reading strip, you can provide students with some of those. And here I don't know if you guys can see these. This is what they look like. It's kind of gray and has that blank space. Here is a blue tinted one with a line to kind of follow along with. Enlarging your print, using a text-to-speech software such as Speechify, Dragon Naturally Speaking, Read and Write. Rose, what was the one you had?
Oh, this is amazing.
Office Lens.
Yeah, a free app for your phone called Office Lens. It's from Microsoft. And it's a PDF reader, but they've put in some incredible dyslexia specific text to speech and then picture dictionary. It's really great. Check out Office Lens.
And that's awesome. I haven't really heard of that one before. There's other ones like Immersive Reader.
Yes, it goes to Immersive Reader.
No. Okay, gotcha.
Sorry, zip.
That is awesome. And I do want to point out that the more that I continue to play with all of this technology and try to figure out the best way to help my students, these different types of software are different across a Chromebook, a laptop, and an iPad. And so Speechify, you can get as a Chrome extension on your laptop or computer. But on an iPad, it works a lot like Office Lens, where you can take a picture and it will allow you to pick different voices that will read that text. So it kind of turns it into a PDF as well, and you can import stuff through that. So it doesn't work quite as well as I thought it should on a Chrome extension. So keep that in mind when you're using these different tools. Students can use a C pen, which is just a pen like this that you scan over the top of your text and it reads it in different voices. The kids can plug in headphones to it. There's a dictionary on there. It can be kind of cumbersome for some. And then having a sound wall instead of a word wall is beneficial for students. And there's a link on there to Tools for Reading, which has a great sound wall, and they have a vowel valley that they have an example of, and there's a great presentation on there about how to use a sound wall as well.
And I was going to click on it and I clicked some other things, so I'm not going to do that. And I will try to get back to being able to change pages, which, oh. All right, let's see what I did. Okay, I'm good now. Sorry,
Okay.
Gordon.
And then we have digital books. YouTube is really great for finding books that are read aloud sometimes by celebrities or other random people. So you can search for different books by different people, find a voice that your child prefers. Learning Ally is great because they do provide their books read by a human voice. People actually volunteer to read books for them. Epic is one that I had just came across that is free for teachers. and they have some great book choices on there. A lot of those free resources, sometimes they don't have the best book choices. They're kind of like an off the market kind of books. But they really had some books that I was impressed by. You can also choose like AR category, or they have read aloud, or they have audiobooks on there as well. Bookshare is another one that is somewhat popular with some teachers. Talking book program. I'm not familiar with that one, Kim, but
I'm not that familiar. We just heard it was a good program.
okay. And then ReadWorks is a good one, and you can choose different reading passages by different reading levels or topics. And it provides questions for each of those passages. And so there's different ways to use that throughout your whole classroom, or just with individual students. So.
Do we have any questions yet, Robin? This is a good time before we switch into math.
We don't. It looks like Rose put in the chat for us the name of her recommendation, which was Office Lens.
All right. Okay, this is some things that might work, but are not necessarily scientifically approved. Colored overlays. This was way back. The only way that they had discovered helps some students, and they're called Erlin. It's from the Erlin Institute. Blue is a favorite color of a lot of kids. I had a student that had blue tinted glasses, and he said those really helped him. This Dramamine is a very weird one. I had an 8th grader who could read one day and not the next. And so I asked her, I said, what is going on? And she said, I forgot to take my Dramamine. So getting the inner ear to settle down helped her. Dyslexia font. A lot of these programs have different fonts. They'll have a D in front of it, and just go through them and see if one works better for another. We found some kids do better with cursive than with the standard print. Spacing of the words. This is where you can space them out a little, because sometimes the kids can't tell where one word ends and one starts. So now we get into math, my favorite. Since I'm dyslexic, I was in summer school all through 6th grade to learn how to read, but since you always had to take 2 classes, one was reading, the other would be math. So with math, manipulatives are super important. I use them in the high school all the time. And once I retired and then I went back and subbed, we were doing some geometry, and I said, where are the manipulatives? And that teacher had none. And so I'm getting paper and cutting it and making manipulatives, because then the kids can understand the concepts a lot easier. Calculators. I was pretty dead set about letting kids use a calculator for their math facts until a student I've been working with for the last 6 years, a college student now. And in our discussions, I knew she was hard of hearing, but I did not realize she really was dyslexic, because she doesn't have the typical flipping the letters around. Her left side of her brain is 10% smaller than her right, or you could be positive and go her right side is 10% larger. But because of that, math facts are very difficult for her to retain. And so, and you don't let them not learn how to do the math facts, but don't slow them down. Let them use that calculator. A hundredths chart is another great way to help the little ones. Number lines. And then chart or graph paper to keep track of the columns. You can take line paper and just turn it 90 degrees, and they can then line up their numbers. And then here is a link to find good graph paper that you can print. Those are free. And if you're looking at all these manipulatives, the dice, some kids don't do well with the dots. So get little stickers and put them on there and make it like the number 6. These Unifex cubes, I think those are Unifex cubes, great for fractions. If you put a whole bunch of them together, great for 3D. These pattern blocks, Super good for getting kids to look for patterns. Math is all patterns. And if they're not seeing the patterns, then math is going to be difficult. I have my kids, my high school kids, do jigsaw puzzles. And it lets me know right away who knows how to put, find the outside edge and then the middle, or some do the middle and then the outside. Some are looking at colors and shapes. Others are just random trying to pick this piece, see if it'll fit. Of course it doesn't. So use those manipulatives. And then you have numbered dice instead of the dots, as I just mentioned. Real world problems. Just stick the kid's name into the problem and it changes their focus. It's about them.
There's so many names that are unpronounceable for even an adult, and you spend so much time trying to figure out who in the heck they're talking about.
Yep. Same math problems for homework, but only do the odds or the evens. Now this is an accommodation or a modification, depending on how you use it. I've always, the kids always hated me, but when they went to college, they thanked me. I always made them do 20 to 25 problems of homework. I'd start in class and finish at home. But the kids I knew that took longer, but could do it, I would tell them, do the odds or do the evens. Kind of depended on if the answers were in the back of the book and if I could trust them. If I could trust them, it was do the odds and check your work. If not, they had the English. Now this one, Jordan and I discuss. Touch math, if you don't know what it is where each number has a little dot on it, and that's how the kids count. And it ends up as all they're doing is counting up. And when I have high school kids going 2 plus 2, and they're doing the touch to get to 4, I have a real hard time, especially if they're not special ed. Touch math was developed to help special needs kids. So please do not teach that to your regular general ed kids, because they will depend on it forever. And it's a very bad habit to get rid of. Using their fingers, it's like you're sucking your thumb. Eventually they stop because it's embarrassing. Using your fingers in class is somewhat embarrassing. But they have done studies. Fingers help the brain. Touch math, I haven't seen any data on that one. Jordan, you want to give your spiel on that?
I still use touch math, especially when I'm working with larger numbers. Just using my pencil to continue to count on. So your example, Kim, of adding 2 plus 2 and counting 1, 2, 3, 4, not something I use it for typically. But I feel it gives another visual representation of the number. And so, they might not have to always count by touching, but provides them another access point. So
yeah, it's if your kid is really struggling, then I have no trouble using it, but then try to wean them off of it. Okay. Accommodations for all academic subjects. So advance notice, tell the kid the day before what you're going to talk about, and they can go home and read it or discuss it with their parents. So they have an idea of what is coming up for them to learn. Provide the student the day before or the beginning of class with a card that has a question you're going to ask them so they can participate in class. They are given a heads up. Double check that they are comfortable with the answer and then call on them later. That lets them be part of the class and it lowers the anxiety. They're not sitting there hoping and praying you're not going to call on them. One thing I left off was, please don't go around the room and ask everybody to read a paragraph. I remember even through high school, counting how many kids were ahead of me to figure out what paragraph I was on. And if I didn't count right or the teacher skipped somebody, I was doomed. And it's very embarrassing. So I know a lot of teachers have gotten away from that, which is good. But also, try to encourage your kids that struggle with reading to read. The other thing I would do is write on the board backwards at the beginning of class on the first day of school. And the kids would go, they would go, "What are you doing?" My dyslexic kids immediately knew what I had done. And so then I explained I have dyslexia. From then on, no kid was ridiculed, made fun of because they were dyslexic, because they knew I was. So if you can write backwards, go for it. Task cards for math, these are really good. Let them know the steps to solve an equation. Step 1, write the problem down, double check that you copied it right, and then the steps that follow. We discovered at the high school level, if we wrote a test in font 14 or larger, the kids did better. It was a psychological play for them because big font means it's easy. And that's what they thought. So, you think it's easy, it is a little easier. Give directions orally in chunks so that they can only wrap their head around a few things. Part of dyslexia is some of the kids have auditory processing problems, which we did not realize our daughter had until she went to college. And she called home and she says, "Mom, if I can qualify for special ed, I get to register for my courses first." And when you go to the public universities, that registration could mean a year of college tuition that you don't have to pay because they can get into their classes. So I told her, I said, "Go for it, but I don't think your dyslexia is that bad because you've learned how to accommodate it and how to work around it." So she took the test, and called back and she says, "Mom, I have an auditory processing problem." And then I felt really bad because I thought she was having selective hearing her whole life when I gave her a list of chores and she only did 1 or 2. So give the directions in small chunks, write them on the board so they're seeing it and hearing it. Break large projects into smaller parts with due dates. So like for senior project or those, the PACE projects that the middle school kids have to do, have each section due at a certain time, and then they can make revisions and then do the whole, hand in the whole thing at the end. But they don't know how to manage their time. That's one of the biggest problems a lot of dyslexics have is, "Oh, I have enough time." Well, they have no concept that 10 minutes or an hour, there's a difference. Provide background information before you start. Some of our kids they think in pictures and in stories. So you've got to get them into the story before you start it. So if you're doing a lesson on volcanoes, talk about volcanoes to get them on path with you, and then you can go on with the story.
Engage them by asking them, what do they already know about volcanoes? Ask them questions, increase their oral language skills. That oral language is such a huge component, and it's left out a lot because we do so much busy work, so much paperwork, because we want to take a grade. We want to see what they know, but you're not going to find out everything that they know by having them write it down all the time.
Right. Yeah, because your dyslexic kids are going to use smaller words and fewer words because just forming the letters is hard. So if you really want to know what they know, you got to do it orally.
Yeah.
So this is where the options for how to demonstrate their knowledge comes from. Can they give a PowerPoint presentation? Can they do a diorama?
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. And then don't penalize them for spelling errors and poor handwriting. And this is where if they could do it on the computer, it can spell check, get Grammarly, and all those other things that will help. Yours, Jordan.
All righty. Response accommodations. Student provides response in a format easier. So like Kim was just saying, a PowerPoint presentation or recording themselves discussing whatever topic it is that you're having them do a report for, or instead of taking a quiz, doing some type of more of a book report format, or instead, if they do enjoy writing, let them write. But again, don't be grading for that spelling during that time. Or using pictures. Can they just use pictures or put together a poster board with kind of more engaging stuff? being able to dictate their answers to somebody that is typing it, an aide or the teacher, or, you know, running down their vocab quiz orally. I mean, do they really know it? Being able to reduce the number of answer choices on a multiple choice test. So instead of having 4 choices, so A, B, C, and D, just have 3 choices. Another one that works really well. So if you have like, you have matching the vocab word to the definition, chunk those into 1 through 5, and then provide them, you know, A through E for that section, and then break it up into another section. And so they're only having 5 or so to choose from instead of the whole list of 20 words that they're having to continue to read and sort through and sort through. Matching in smaller chunks, using a spelling dictionary. And like, I think it is OneNote where they provide a picture dictionary option. If you highlight a word, there's an option to click on picture dictionary and it shows a picture of what the meaning of that word is. So that's pretty cool. Spell checker, using Grammarly. I know in the college class that I'm currently in, our professor wants us to, she said, do not turn it in unless you've submitted it through Grammarly first. Oh, we'll have to go over that. It's like a little picture icon. Spelling dictionary. Kim, Kim has a spelling dictionary. I wasn't familiar with one.
Yeah, in the old days, it was a little green book and all it had was the words in it. You had to know somewhat how to spell it, but there were no definitions. So you just had to kind of have an idea what it looked like and then go ahead and look it up, which for me helped. Also, you know, just a regular dictionary. I remember when I was in my master's program, we could take it at any location in the college. And about 3 of us raised our hand at once and we said, where is the dictionary? Because we knew we couldn't spell them. And so there was 5 of us that turned out in this one room with this huge table, and that dictionary just flew around that table because, you know, to help us spell, because we didn't have spell check back then.
And then providing your students with a calculator or math table or multiplication chart, a hundreds chart. So a hundreds chart would be used more for addition and subtraction. And then your math facts or multiplication table would be used for your multiplication and division.
Right. I wanted to say something back here real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, on the this one here with the, that one there, sorry, wrong computer I was on. What I like to do is give the kids a test, and multiple choice questions are very hard for dyslexics. So I would then ask the kid orally the ones they missed and to see if that improves their grade. And a lot of times it does. Okay, setting accommodations. Take the test in a small group or a quiet location. That was huge for me. And I remember taking the ISET, which I took something else. But if the kids started getting up to say they're done, that movement would make me nervous because I was still only halfway through and they're done and I'm panicking. So small group, quiet location. If there's talking going on, I can't read. And that's still true today.
Mm-hmm.
Sit where the child learns best. Some need to be near the teacher in that front row. I had one that needed to be in the back row because that child needed to move. So I put him on a yoga ball and everything would be okay for a while. And then he'd start bouncing and I'd have to do, you know, slow it down. I had another one who would sit in the back of the room by the door and he'd go, you know, like this to let me know he needs to run. And I'd say, okay, go. Now, this was a private school. I don't know if you can do it at public schools. And he'd run to the fence and back and could settle down and work. Special lighting or acoustics. A lot of kids like the lights low and they like it where there's not a lot of sound.
And I know, Kim, they come out with, I've just seen these recently, your fluorescent light covers. It's like basically a plastic tablecloth that some people will put up over their fluorescent lights to kind of tone that down a little bit, because that's kind of causes some issues. And I'd just like to add, sitting where the child learns best. It's not necessarily where we think that they should be sometimes, moving them closer to your desk so you can constantly be like, pay attention, pay attention. Sometimes that's not the best spot. So just kind of playing around with that seating arrangement. Maybe not so much this day and age, but.
Yeah. Okay, sensory tools. So a quiet one is to get exercise bands and wrap them around the legs of the chair to make a loop. And then the kids can put their feet on it and wiggle their feet back and forth. Sometimes movement really helps the brain. I've worked most of my teaching career with at-risk students. And we found, this is back when peanuts weren't a big no-no in school, but we found if the kids were chewing, their brains were working. And so the school had all these Spanish peanuts, which they couldn't serve anymore. We checked, none of our kids had any allergies to it. So they ate an awful lot of Spanish peanuts, and it really helped in the class. They also can't talk when they're chewing. Yoga balls, as I mentioned, but you need to put them where they're not distracting others. Special chairs. They've got chairs out there now, and there's some pictures here where they can ride a bike. There's one where they can put their feet on the pedals and go this way or this way, back and forth. One pedestal that helps with their abdomen, helping them control their stomach muscles. Squeeze balls. Spinners I don't really like because sometimes they fly or make noise. Seat cushions. This would have helped my son when he was in 5th grade. I happened to walk by his classroom because he went to the same school I taught at. And I noticed all the boys were standing in 5th grade and the girls were sitting. And so after class, I asked him, why are you guys all standing? And he says, Mom, it hurts to sit. And so I noticed at one of the high schools, they had these little seat cushions. You could get those little foam things that you use in the swimming pool or the ones that you use as a knee pad when you're working in the yard, but something to make those hard chairs not so hard.
Yeah. Boys are developmentally different than girls. And so sitting on those hard surfaces really is hard for some of them.
And along that line, Jordan, just when you said developmentally, I was listening to a webinar the other day, and 5-year-olds, especially boys, they're a year behind at that young age on the fine motor skills. So printing for a 5-year-old boy is very difficult. And so don't refer them because, it's really sloppy and all that. Give them some time. There's a difference between dyslexia and just developmentally not ready.
Is this one mine?
Yep.
Okay. Timing accommodations, providing more time to complete a task, a homework assignment, a test, so like Kim was saying earlier, putting them in a quiet environment where they don't get anxious if everybody else is finishing early. So they do have that extra time and they'll take that time to put forth their best effort and they're not worried about being the last one done. Extra time to process spoken information and directions. Being in the gen ed classroom as a teacher, you have so many students to manage and kids want to be the first one to answer, but allowing that extra time and creating that routine for providing that extra time to where those kids are used to it and they know you're not going to call on just the first person is very beneficial for those kiddos. It allows them time to process, allows them to put their answer together in how they would respond. And you want to engage them as much as possible and incorporate them into what's going on because they typically get left behind. They're not the ones who are going to raise their hand first. So, like Kim said earlier, provide them with a question ahead of time of what you are going to ask and allow them to process that. Frequent breaks. So letting them get up and go to the bathroom, or just get up and move, run across the fields, things like that. Deliver something down to another teacher, an envelope with nothing in it, or put a little note in it and send it down, say, hey, can you please go deliver this to so-and-so? But allowing that time for movement is key for a lot of kiddos.
Yeah, and on this, the more time and to allow those kids, I always, in my math classes, if the kids brought a book to read, they got 1 extra credit point, which does not affect their grade at all, but they thought so. And then when they finished, they would just sit there and read. And that really helped with my middle school kids, because then nobody's walking around and talking and getting antsy. They're all doing something.
Scheduling, more time to complete a project, breaking a project into smaller chunks and helping them organize that. So giving them a due date for those smaller chunks, because scheduling and that time management can be really difficult for these kiddos. Take a test in several time sessions or over several days. If you have, give them that break in between, send them down, take a walk, come back. Take it in the morning. A lot of kids are more functional in the morning after they've gotten up, ate breakfast, rather than in the afternoon after they've eaten lunch. Typically a lot of kiddos are more tired after lunch. It's the end of the day, their brains are exhausted, especially your dyslexic kiddos are going to be way more exhausted because their brains are working overtime. Take them in a different order, pick out their strengths, do those first, or vice versa. Excuse me. Take a test during a specific time of day, like we just talked about. Having a scribe write down their written response if you know that is a struggle, if that's very time consuming. And I get it. I know that's difficult to find an extra person to sit with a student to write down one person's information when you have people around the room asking questions. Sometimes that can be difficult, but just do the best you can to work with the student, with the parents. So.
Yeah, and Jordan and I are what we call educational therapists. We work one-on-one with children that have dyslexia and other learning disabilities. And I work with 3 little girls, they're sisters, and one of them has ADHD worse than the other 2, or the other 2. And so we tried different time slots for me to work with her, and we discovered that first one right in the morning. I started them at 8:30. So from 8:30 to 9:20, I work with them for 80 minutes. She can make it almost that whole 80 minutes without losing it. And so, but I also let her, they have a swing in the room, and I let her, when we do oral stuff, she goes on the swing so that she can have that movement going while she's working with me. So if you can accommodate these kids, especially ADHD and dyslexia, a lot of times they go together. So. Okay, organizational skills. So this is something you see these kids where their desk is a mess, their backpack's a mess, they can't find anything. So you need to help them with that. Use an alarm to help them with time management. So like for their math, tell them, okay, you're going to have 20 minutes, set the timer. So when it's up, that gives the kids the idea, oh, okay, that's 20 minutes. Then they move on to their next assignment. Mark the text with a highlighter. They can't mark their books, unfortunately, but I think now a lot of things are in a way they can. Use the planner. Have them write in it every day what they need to do. Have the teacher double check it to make sure it's all there, and have the parents check it. I used to have a 1, 2, 3 system with my middle school kids, especially the ones that I got that had ADHD that came from the University of Irvine. They went from that private school to my private school, back to regular school. And we used a planner, and they got points for how well they could keep track of their stuff. and receive study skills instruction. I don't like study skills being totally by itself because it's by itself. It needs to be in a course because the study skills for math are different than the study skills for English and science. So try to use these to help them organize their activities. And then good teaching for all kids. Whatever you do for a dyslexic child, it will help all children. We are pretty sure that my grandson, who's from my daughter, is dyslexic just because he did not like reading, and there were some signs there. And because speech delay is another one, or speech impediments, and he had to have speech therapy. But his teacher taught him phonics, phonemic awareness, and the mouth, how you make the sounds. And I always thought it was kind of weird watching him do this, but that was before I got educated about how to teach children how to read. So have students repeat direction. So if you're dictating, have them repeat the sentence, then write the sentence. Teach new vocabulary explicitly, relate it to things. Talk about the root word, the affixes, which is your suffixes and your prefixes, words that are similar. Similar words are harder for these kids than antonyms. So synonyms are real hard because that's something you have to know more words that are the same. Relate concepts to prior knowledge, manipulatives, especially in math, hands-on activities whenever you can do that. Provide concrete examples. Don't make everything abstract because that's hard. Alternate quiet and active so that they're not sitting the whole time. Don't do a lot of writing and then a lot of movement stuff. Mix the two because as Jordan mentioned, your dyslexic kids are going to be tired. They are not lazy. They are working harder than any of your other kids. It takes them forever because what happens with the dyslexic child is the brain from the left of the reading and language is all in the left, but that side is not connected to the right. And so they have to develop all of the little neurons and whatever they are, the other things that are called, so that they can retrieve the words quickly. And then remove distractions. I remember when I first started at the alternative high school in Meridian, I had a shoot for the stars, long banner across the top of my whiteboard. And I asked the students, most of these were 11th and 12th graders, and I asked them, what do I need to do with the room so you guys can pay attention? I said, get rid of that. Anything that was distracting in the room, we had to move to the back. And I know at my private school, there was nothing in the front, and in the back, my whole wall was baby animals for me to look at. But the kids, they had to have it plain so they wouldn't get distracted. Testing. Okay, Jordan.
All right. State testing accommodations. So with state testing accommodations, I am going to put a link here in the chat. Before we get started on that.
The link is also at the bottom of all the PowerPoint of the whole part. So if you can't get it for Jordan, it's at the end.
Yes. So these state testing accommodations, they have 3 different categories: universal tools, which everybody has access to. So breaks, having a calculator for certain things. So those are all embedded things, notepad, a dictionary, a highlighter. And those settings can be changed by whoever is setting up your testing. And then they have non-embedded tools, breaks, dictionary, scratch paper, a thesaurus. And then it moves down to designated supports, which those are, everybody can have access to those, but they need to be used, consistently in the classroom throughout the school year, and decided by the team. So gen ed teacher, parent, Title I maybe, but they're accessible for all students. And then your Accommodations are some things like sign language, braille and stuff that some kids can have access to, but you need a 504 or an IEP. So the non-embedded ones would be your hundreds table, an abacus, alternative response thing. But these state testing accommodations that we have here in our presentation, your print size, so being able to enlarge things, having a Zoom, English glossary, so being able to look up definitions. And then if we go to the next page, color contrast, the students can have access to being able to adjust their screen to be in darker or lighter, masking where you're blocking out content that doesn't need to be there or that's distracting for that student. So it just kind of covers up certain areas where I guess it doesn't provide them. Or to view one answer choice at a time, your text to speech. So this is where I struggle because your text to speech options in your state testing is just provided for some things wherever they have decided to provide it, and it's a computerized voice that is reading some of this information. If you have in your IEP that the students have oral presentation or read aloud option, then a human person has to read that stuff. But there are specific guidelines that whoever is providing that accommodation has to abide by. You have to use like a monotone voice, and you're only allowed to read certain things. But all in all, it's much better than having the computerized voice read it.
Next one.
Next one, when to ask for modifications. Is that
Sorry.
you?
Are we done on this one?
Yes. Oh, color contrast. Yep.
Okay.
Unless anybody has any questions.
Oops, does help to go the right way. Have we got any questions there? Guess not. Okay. When to ask for modifications. Now keep in mind, modifications are changing what the student learns, not how the student learns. So it's a lot different. Only do that because there's consequences to it, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So modifications only ask for them after all the accommodations have been tried. And you as parents or as teachers need to start advocating for your students to get these accommodations. And then only after comprehensive evaluations and student data have been analyzed. Because sometimes, the evaluations, those tests, the Woodcock-Johnson, the WISC, that's a shot one time. And sometimes if the child's too nervous, too anxious, they're not going to do well. So look at their classwork. How good is that? And then student is 2 or more years behind his or her peers and is not making any progress. That's when you start looking at modifications. So what types of modifications are available? Shortened or easier reading assignments or homework. Okay, be careful on this. Shorten, I don't have a trouble with because that'll keep your student at grade level. But if you make it easier, you're reducing what the vocabulary that child is exposed to. And the homework can be, if it's different from the class, not just half, but if it's totally different, then the child is being kept back a little on the academics, which some kids need. You know your students, you know your children more than we do. So you know what's best for your kid. Fewer words on the spelling test. And Jordan and I talked a lot about this. A lot of times they're given 20 words. Test them grade them on 10, but expect them to do all 20, but only grade on 10. That way they stay up with their classmates. If that is too difficult, then yes, cut it back down to 10. Different list of spelling words than given to the other students. That is a modification. That is teaching them something different than their classmates. test, fewer questions, easier questions on different content. Fewer questions might work and keep them at grade level, but the easier questions and at different content, that's going to be a real modification. And alternate standardized testing can have a negative consequences if, because the alternate testing is not the same. And so it is, help me out, Jordan, when they take
So-
that alternate test.
The alternate test is for severe kiddos, your kids who are nonverbal or have a severe disability. And there are certain stipulations to who qualifies to take that alternate test. In my opinion, when I provided that test to my kiddos, you're reading it to them and it's lower grade level content, but a lot of my kids, you have them look at the picture and then you read them a paragraph and then you read the answer choices and they're like, oh yeah, there was a dog in the picture. And the question wasn't even about a dog, but it had mentioned it. Really, oh, that's my favorite color. Or, it really is not designed for those kiddos, in my opinion. I never felt like there was an accurate measurement to that alternate test of what those kids really were capable of. And sometimes they guess the right answer a lot. and your kiddos, you can tell if they're guessing or if they're putting a sincere effort into it and genuinely know the answer. So, so I don't think many kids have access to that alternate testing. And, as a parent, just use your best judgment on if that is the best thing for your kid to participate in that. Some of those kids, it causes severe anxiety. And, I don't feel that you get a whole lot of useful information in a timely manner to help those kiddos. So,
All right.
I did want to touch base on that spelling real quick, Kim. I just wanted to say, Kim and I were talking earlier about different ways to accommodate poor spellers, maybe providing a multiple choice test for the correct spelling. So you're providing all of the spelling words, but maybe providing it in a multiple choice format. That was something I hadn't heard of before until recently.
Yeah, and knowing how I have one of the little girls I work with, forming all the letters is very difficult for her. B's and D's, she really struggles to get them in the right direction. We haven't tried it, but I'm thinking that giving her a multiple choice might help her. So,
Yeah.
it's an option to make it so that they're getting an accommodation instead of a modification. We want to keep them in accommodation as much as we can.
Right. And so Kim, Robin had just posted that parents always have the option to opt out of standardized testing. And I completely agree. And, again, if you feel that's in the best interest of your kid, I would encourage you to do that. But like we were talking earlier before this started, when you opt your kid out of that standardized testing, you are removing your child's possibly lower scores. And so it shows that your district has students that have scored up here when that's not necessarily accurate because a certain amount of them opted out and they would have kind of lowered your school's score. So
Yeah,
something to think about.
Right. And the other thing is all schools have to have 95% of their students take the test. And so if too many parents opt out, then the school gets in trouble. And I don't know what the consequences are, but I think I'm hunting the parents to get the kid at school to take the test. Okay. So more modification, allow outlining instead of writing a whole report. Alternative books and materials on the topic being studied. I know when I taught high school kids that were at a third grade reading lesson level, We gave them Romeo and Juliet at a 3rd grade level. They were still reading the same content, but at a lower level. And that is a modification. Computerized spell check and Grammarly support. That's, they have it listed as a modification, but we also think it's a great accommodation. Word bank choices for a test, which we just discussed. Depending on how you use it, it can be an accommodation or a modification. Okay, Jordan.
All right.
Yeah.
And a lot of these folks, if you go out and do your own research, a lot of modifications and accommodations, you'll find them in both categories. So like Kim said, it depends on how you use it. But going through and highlighting important words or phrases in a reading assignment or even in instructions, that's sometimes helpful. In a math word problem, going through and highlighting or underlining some of those important concepts or components to that math problem. Use of a calculator, number line, hundreds chart, film or video supplements in place of reading a text, reworded questions in simpler language. So as long as you're providing access to the same content as everybody else, right? You're wanting them to get that information. That's an accommodation. If you're changing what they're learning, that's a modification.
And then on this one up here, the highlighting the important words, if you know that there are new words in the text that the students are reading, go over those words before the kids read. I think most teachers do that, but it really helps them to know what those big words are that they're not familiar with. Or it could be a small word like phonemic. Took me forever to learn that word. Doesn't make sense to me the way it's spelled. Yeah. All right, more modifications. Projects instead of written reports. Modified workload. We talked about that, depending on how you do it. Time demands. Do they get the weekend instead of everything's due Friday? They get to turn it in on Monday. And then the pass, no pass option, which I just read one state is doing that. I think it's Massachusetts, for the kids that don't have access to online. Instead of giving them a grade, they're just giving them a no pass until they have time to catch up.
All right. I also like that option, Andrea, verbally spelling your spelling words for your spelling test. So that removes that written component, which can sometimes get in the way. Having modified grades based on your IEP. So please make sure that you put that in the IEP. Learning different material, multiplication while the class learns fractions, graded according to different standards than their peers, and being excused from particular projects.
Yeah, all of these are true modifications.
Yeah, so you're lessening the knowledge that the student is getting access to.
So the pros and cons of modifications. Start with the cons. Make school easier for the child, but can result in learning less than one's peers, which can lead to a big disadvantage over time. So if they're only learning half each year, that becomes many years by the time they're a senior in school. So kind of think about that. And as a result, the kids may not qualify to graduate from high school because they haven't taken the courses, or they can't pass the courses at the level they need to for high school. The pros is spell check makes writing easier for the student, enables the teacher to read and the content, read for content instead of spelling. And the goals in the IEP need to be ambitious to help child progress toward grade level. So you could start with these modifications, but put in their IEP that they need to learn such, need to learn how to add 1-digit numbers by November, 2-digit numbers by March. If you don't put deadlines in that IEP, they're not going to get, they have till the end of the school year. So you want to push the child and the teachers, but you have to be very sensitive to what the child can do and not do.
Student success plan. You'd want to create, make a request with the school to meet with your homeroom teacher, your special ed teacher, Title I, the school counselor, anybody who would have any knowledge about the student, right? So if you're having emotional or behavioral issues, you want to include the principal or administrator of some kind, your reading specialist, dyslexia specialist. I know in a lot of states, most of the schools have to have access to a dyslexia specialist. Whether or not that's happening in some states, that's another story. But you want to gather all of these people that know your kiddo or work with your kiddo to focus on the child's strengths and also work to address their deficit areas. In that plan, you want to have a detailed list of accommodations necessary for student success. And with some of those accommodations, they might not need them in all settings. So I want you to keep that in mind. A detailed list of modifications if necessary. Identify if it's some type of language processing disorder, which dyslexia falls under that category. A lot of people don't realize that a speech therapist also addresses a language deficit. I didn't know that until here a year or two ago. I was like, oh, what's the, speech and language therapist? What's that language component? Because your special ed teacher and SLP don't interact all that much from my experience. But they really are, everyone on this team is such a huge component in getting this student to move forward and make progress. Make sure you detail who is responsible for providing those services, and having a list of specific goals that are specific for that student, not just any general goal. But as a SPED teacher, it is hard to measure certain areas, and so having that discussion with your parent and gen ed teacher and figuring out as a team how to measure that stuff so that you can show growth. What are you looking for there is really important. Yep, and just make sure it's all written into your 504 or IEP.
And another thing that Idaho's getting a little better on this, because before we were not allowed to use the word dyslexia. Now you can. And if they don't want to put it into the diagnosis part, because unless you have a psychologist or Kirsten Lewis who can identify and diagnose, just say the kid has characteristics of dyslexia, and that is acceptable. If they won't put it in the top part, you put it in the parent comment part, but get the word dyslexia written in there somewhere.
Yeah. And really, if you are just developing an IEP or eligibility, you should be filling out a developmental history form, which talks about, your family history and stuff. If you have a family history of struggling readers, please include that. That is such a huge component, knowing that, a parent or an aunt or grandparent struggled with reading, or if there was a language delay of any kind. And sometimes I feel that parents don't include that information because they're embarrassed, or maybe they don't think that it'll be beneficial, but it really is.
Yeah, because most of your parents were not identified.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was lucky that my mom was identified, but she was 65 when they discovered that the blue overlay helped her, but they said at her age it was kind of too late. And so we were she was aware to watch for me, and then I was aware to watch for our daughter. But it took until our daughter was in 3rd grade to figure out what she was doing, because all of us are very different in how our dyslexia manifested itself. because my mom, the sentences would move around on the page. With me, the letters would flip around. With my daughter, she would get the beginning and the end of a word correct, but she would mess up the letters in the middle. That took until third grade to figure out. And then, you know, we
Yeah.
did intervention really fast, which helped her. She became an avid reader after 5 weeks of being required to read for an hour a day and crying about it. And then after 6 weeks, Dad was crying because she wouldn't put the book down. So,
Well, and I would like to encourage everybody, you know, if your kids are struggling readers and, you know, they're constantly giving books at their reading level, provide them with audiobooks or read aloud to your kiddo at books at their level or above to expose them to that higher level vocabulary. Because if you don't do that, those kids are constantly still thinking in that lower grade level, and you are not providing them access to grade level content or not increasing their vocabulary to where they can carry on a conversation at grade level and then provide something in a written form or oral form or anything. So that's super important.
yeah, because eventually we found most of these kids do learn how to read, but it may not kick in till third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade. And if their vocabulary is not up to that grade level, then they're at a disadvantage. So if you can keep the vocabulary up with the grade level, then when they finally get the reading under control, then they're fine. You know, they'll
Yeah.
still be slow readers. You know, we have, you know, competition. How long is it going to take mom to read something? You know, but that's the way it goes. You know, you learn to live with it. So, are there any questions for either one of us?
Jennifer, if you want to come off of mute, I'd like to know what you think about the words their way. You know, I've heard good things and I've heard bad things. You know, that's my issue with a lot of the core curriculum these days is that the spelling words or spelling tests that they give, they really, you have a whole list of 20 words and there's only like 2 spelling patterns that are the same in those 20 words. So like you're R controlled. So you have URORERIR, and those kids have to go through all of those, and there's not enough repetition with that spelling pattern, I don't think. And I feel that it causes issues for some of our kiddos.
Jennifer going to come on and
Robin, I really like your vocab test. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, my son is definitely more on the severe side of the spectrum. So we just decided to get away from spelling words. It was too daunting for him. And I had a teacher that was willing to just do a weekly vocabulary test verbally. So
I like it.
it worked out really well. His vocabulary, you know, stayed at grade level, like Kim spoke of, how important that is to keep them. You know, his reading ability is so low that you don't want him to miss out on grade level content. So yeah, he did really well. I appreciated a lot of the accommodations that you ladies shared tonight. I feel like it's so important once these kiddos pass or move on, maybe to junior high might be the age, or maybe fourth grade is the age. But for my son, once we started middle school, you know, you're really reading to learn, not learning to read. And he's still so behind in his reading abilities that's really when the accommodations become so important. So I just want to mention that I know here in West Ada, we have a AT gal down at the district, and she will do an assistive technology evaluation. So if you've got a student on an IEP, and I always try to educate any parents that call me, because that is available in all of our school districts, or it should be. Jordan, maybe it's not in the smaller districts, but It is supposed to be available for kids to receive an assistive technology evaluation that can then be included in their IEP. And that really just means someone from the district is going to come out and introduce this student to all kinds of different things like the C-Pen that Jordan shared earlier on, or immersive reader and speech to text. And then those things that worked for that kiddo get put into the IEP as listed as an accommodation. So that's something to consider if you haven't done that or had your AT support from your district come out and work with you.
I would love to know more about maybe your person's contact information, because in your smaller districts, you don't have anybody available like that I'm aware of that will do an IT or AT evaluation.
I can tell you that there is a free resource through U of I, and I do have a contact I could share, but Nick Stallings is his name, and he runs AT out of U of I, and it's funded through our Board of Education or Department of Education in some capacity, but he has a library, if you will, of AT support. So a parent or a teacher can go to him and rent out AT. They can rent out a C-Pen. They can rent out.
Rent out means at no cost.
Right. It's free. Yes. Thank you, Jordan. It's free. So it's just like going to the library. I should check. You're going to check out, not rent out. You're going to check out different AT, manipulatives, and you can take them home and try them, or you can bring them into your school and try them. I mean, Nick is a huge resource to come to your school and introduce teachers or parents to different options.
Yeah, and that's the AT, for those who don't know, it's assistive technology. And the one thing, if you have a high school student that is going on to college and needs some of these assistive technologies, please have them learn how to use them in high school. The colleges in some ways are much better than the K-12 system, as I found with my students that I work with. When we discovered she needed that calculator, I asked, is it on your IEP at CWI? She goes, no. I said, well, then go get it on there. She did it in one day. She walked in, said, I need this on it. They said, okay, which you can't do with the K-12 system, but learn how to use the equipment before you go to college, because they expect you to know how to use it at that point.
I just posted in the chat Nick's email address. He has a team down there, so any teacher or parent can reach out to him, and he's a huge support for assistive technology for all students, not just dyslexic students. But
the lending library, is that what that's called? I can't remember. It's been since last year that I actually looked into it.
And Nick is stationed in Boise, right?
Yeah, he's downtown Boise, but if you're not in the Treasure Valley area, I would still reach out to him, because I believe that he has resources in other parts of the state that he could connect you with. I think most states have this initiative now. I know I had a parent reach out to me in Oregon, and he was able to connect that family with somebody in Oregon that could provide the same services. So it's something to consider. And I also just appreciated you guys sharing about verbal. Again, my kiddo is in 6th grade. He's at 1st grade level in reading and writing. And just recently, he had a recent AT evaluation done. So he now has all these beautiful things on the laptop that can be downloaded. It's amazing what technology has to offer, where he can it's read to him, and then he can verbally give his answer, and it's typed out, and then it will read to him what the computer thought he said. And if there's a word that he didn't mean, it will highlight as it reads it. And if he's like, oh, I didn't mean that word, the computer heard me wrong, you can click on that highlighted word, and a drop-down menu comes up of other possible words he may have meant, and it will highlight each one and read those. It'll give you the definition of the words. Like, it's just really amazing.
Awesome. That's
Right.
awesome.
So
Go ahead.
no, yeah, just through that, it's just really important to boost the kiddos once they hit middle school, to really help them feel successful, because like
Yeah.
we all know, these kids really are very smart.
I have some kiddos that we've just now started introducing some assistive technology stuff, and just the what, like, oh my gosh, I can do this. Like, I don't have to have my teacher here next to me the whole time.
Yeah,
And-
that independence is so
Oh.
important as they get older, building that
Yeah.
confidence. And like Kim said, these are probably resources that they will use in their adult life. So let's get them proficient with it while they're in school. And
Yeah.
there's so much of it out there. All of it is over my head, but let's let the kids learn it for sure.
On Jennifer's last comment, she said for vocabulary this year, students go study the words and definitions on Quilt, then go to Seesaw and record themselves using the words in a sentence, and maybe then on Quizlet. I'm familiar with Seesaw and Quizlet, but I haven't heard of Quilt before, so I'm not sure if that's a website or what that is.
I've heard of it also. I'm not that familiar.
Oh, gotcha. Quilt should have been Quizlet.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. And then Andrea commented that your college son is asking about textbooks being in audio. Really, I believe most of them really are, or if they're not, then there's technology out there that can transfer it into audio or read it to them, or there's ways to.
Right.
So
and-
some of your older books, or some stuff I have struggled to find an audio version of a lot of my textbooks. So yeah, the one that the Office Lens that Rose had mentioned earlier, Speechify, if you're doing it from an iPad, you can take a picture and it'll translate that. So there is
The Braille Institute, I've heard, will also has a lot of textbooks, and if you don't have the one you have isn't on it, just let them know, and they will.
I was going to mention that, Kim. That's been a huge resource that I've not used myself, but it constantly comes up from educators about using the Braille resource. I don't know that website, but I'm sure we could.
I think if you just do the Braille Institute and then do some Google searching on it, you should find it.
I think on Learning Ally, I think they do some textbooks too. And if you have something that you would like to have them add to their library, you can send in a request for it and they will put it on their list to have it read by a person. So.
I have a
Any
question.
other? Oh, go ahead.
So I'm curious about, there's some common practices in elementary school that I think are humiliating for dyslexic kids. And I wonder if asking for things like not passing the paper back the row to be graded, or calling on someone to read out loud. Is it possible to put those sort of things in writing, or is that just a discussion?
I had it all in my IEP.
Both.
Yeah.
Both.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
It was in my IEP, and I would meet with my teacher before the first day of school to introduce them to my kiddo. I didn't do that initially, but after many years of not doing it and the anxiety that was happening around academics and school, you've got to advocate. You have to get in there. And every teacher I've ever met with is so grateful to know about my son before he would start, so we could start off on the right foot and really embrace him and
Kind of saves you from putting your foot in your mouth sometimes. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the handing back of work, unless, in my math, it was if you did your homework, you got full credit. If you did half of it, you got half credit. And if you didn't do it, you got no credit. And so there wasn't an actual grade for, the score, like 100% or 90%. So those I could hand back, by row, hit it to the top, and then they pass them all back because everybody had the same grade. But if they're graded with letter grades, no, that should not be handed out. A student should never hand it out, and a student should never grade another student's work. Even TAs, which legally are not supposed to. And I keep reminding the teachers that I mentor that you can't have a kid grade papers.
We've got a few minutes left, so if you have any other comments or things that is working at your school that you're doing, you want to share, or questions, you can just unmute yourself and we can have a few minutes of discussion.
Participation in a spelling bee. That's another one that I'd like to be out of.
Have the student with dyslexia be the scorekeeper.
There you go.
Oh, that's kind.
Give them another job so that they don't have to participate. Or as Jordan said, give them that note that needs to go down to the office, and the note says, keep them here for 5 minutes. But yeah, don't embarrass them. We have as a group been talking about doing, I don't know if it's monthly or bi-monthly, that means every other month, other webinars. I'm doing one on math for dyslexic children for BYU next week. We can put that in as a group, and Jordan and I found a bunch of intervention strategies that we could do. So if you're interested in us doing monthly, let us know. How often would you like us to be sharing our knowledge, or just getting together to chat with you? What would you like? If you could put it in the chat or email Robin or one of us, that would be great, because we know there's a great need.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about, I'd come across some material about accommodations or interventions for kiddos for short-term memory, all of those components that you'll find on your cognitive testing. So your long-term memory, short-term memory, visual processing, all of those different components. So we could put something together to discuss those further.
No,
A lot of your kids with dyslexia, they have, that short-term memory, long-term memory issue is a big issue with them. And that's where you have to get the brain to rewire itself. These kids have very good strengths, which will come out when they're adults, but they have to survive our K-12 system before they get to be adults. So anything we can do to help their brains rewire, as well as help the child with their strengths, that'd be good. And then before I forget, if you still want to take the course and get credit for, if you watched all of these, you have until Friday to register for the course at $50. If you use the code, which was Apple 1, I hope. I think it's in the link.
I like that, Kim. It's hard to focus on the kids' strengths sometimes because we're so focused on, well, how do we help them get over the deficit, and changing that mindset, and looking at them of what they're really good at and encouraging that more to help boost that self-esteem is really important.
I agree. It's a game changer once you have a teacher that takes the time to get to know the kiddo for the strengths they have, rather than the focus of, as an educator, that must be hard because you really want to focus on how you can help them develop. But really pulling out what their strengths are is a real booster for their self-confidence, and they can fall in love with learning again, and it's really important.
So
But
some
we're
of some of the strengths that these kids will have, we use the mnemonic MIND. So the M is your material reasoning. This is where they can see 3D. I had one student, that's all she sees. Everything is in 3D. She does not see 2D, which kind of freaked me out, but that's how, she sees words, they got depth. They see patterns and models. I is that interconnected reasoning. How information is connected. These kids, they will look like they're spacing out, but what they're doing is they're connecting everything that you've said, and they will find connections that other people don't. That's why as an adult, they're really good at things. Narrative reason. These kids see things in pictures and stories. So when you're asking them about something, if you can get them to give you a story or, tell me about it, that's their strength. And then dynamic reasoning. These are where they see answers where others can't see it. They can make very good predictions of what's happening. And this is where some of your scientists come in. MIT is known as the Dyslexia University, which is kind of interesting because
The MIT disease.
the MIT disease. Yeah.
Well, I feel like this was a good wrap for the month of October. Lots of great information this month. I know we sent out a survey at our last conference to anyone that had attended about what your needs were, and that's how we built this month's set of webinars. The one topic that we didn't get to that was asked for is executive functioning, which Kim has actually spoke a lot about, both Kim and Jordan, in tonight's presentation, of those executive function, that slow processing, the organization piece, the set the timer, and all those. So I feel like our Decoding Dyslexia group will get together. We do want to hold further webinars and workshops, and hopefully if COVID opens up, we can actually get together face to face and do some modeling and some different deeper dives into instructional support. So stay tuned. Please send us your feedback. I have dogs and children, but send us your feedback. I'm so sorry. And email me anytime. This group is here for you guys and here to support our Idaho teachers so that we're supporting our Idaho kiddos. So we want to hear from you what you guys need. We do have a team that is ready to help put webinars together and workshops together and providing more training. So send me some emails and we will be sending out a survey to everyone that attended. More information for the rhythmic writing. Yes, Andrea, I did get quite a few emails about that, and our rhythmic writing guru, if you will, Miss Connie Rezer, who's local to us. She is unavailable right now, but we're going to get with her as soon as she can and talk first. I think that'll be our number one webinar or workshop that we hope to put together, is going to be specific for rhythmic writing, because that has been the most request we've had. But anyhow, if there's nothing more, Jordan and Kim, I think just everyone, we appreciate you coming. We'll be sending out an email, getting some feedback on what was good, what wasn't good. Please be honest with us. What did you learn that was incredible? What did you come here and didn't learn that you had hoped to learn? Like we're here for you. We want all that feedback and information. And so we'll be in touch through email. And Jordan and Kim, thank you so much for tonight. And thank you everyone who joined.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
They're getting a whole bunch of thank yous in the chat.